Welcome to Plot 27. The story begins in the 2000s. Hank Wallace is a talented high school football quarterback from Eastbrook. One day, Eastbrook is set to play against Wicklesburg. As the game begins, something strange happens to Hank. Something emerges from the ground called ick, a plant-like parasitic substance that seems harmless at first, even though it gradually spreads throughout the town of Eastbrook. Since that night, Hank's career is destroyed after his leg is broken because of ick. His life worsens when his girlfriend Stacy leaves him for their classmate, Ted Kim. Hank has only been living with his father, and his suffering deepens when his father suddenly passes away. Hank later works as a janitor at Eastbrook High School, and years later, he eventually becomes a science teacher. One day, his student named Grace wants to discuss ick. Hank explains that no one knows where it came from. Year after year, the parasite continues to grow, but everyone ignores it because they consider it just a harmless plant. Grace is with her friend Yazlin. They are both cheerleaders for the Eastbrook football team. Hank still hasn't been able to forget Stacy, who is now married to Ted. The two of them run a successful real estate business, and Grace turns out to be their daughter. When Hank plans to buy a rundown bar owned by Ted and Stacy, he begins to suspect that Grace is actually his daughter, not Ted Kim's. Hank then plans to conduct a paternity test using Grace's saliva from a class assignment. One night, Hank is attacked by rapidly growing ick, but he survives thanks to UV light. After conducting some research, Hank discovers that ick only grows in the dark and that its growth stops when exposed to ultraviolet light. While cleaning the bar, Hank is approached by a strange man who orders a drink. Turns out the man has been infected by ick, and fortunately, Hank manages to survive. Shortly after, two police officers arrive. They are Hank's former school friends. The officers have also been infected, along with Hank's fellow teacher, Sophia. Meanwhile, Grace is attending a house party with her boyfriend, Dylan. Grace believes that ick has actually been watching them, but Dylan doesn't believe her. After managing to escape, Hank immediately warns Grace and her friends about the ick threat, but they ignore him. Dylan tries to flirt with another girl after Grace rejects him, but ick suddenly attacks the party and begins infecting and killing many students. Hank rushes back to save Grace. When they are both in danger, a military unit led by Dr. Prentice arrives and rescues them. The surviving residents of Eastbrook are then gathered at a small mart, including Stacy and Ted Kim. Dr. Prentice warns the townspeople to stay indoors until the ick subsides. She explains that her unit has been assigned to prioritize the town of Wicklesburg to protect a hydroelectric dam, leaving the people of Eastbrook to fend for themselves. Dr. Prentice says that intercellular kinoplasma, or ick, could last another 4 to 8 years. Most of the townspeople ignore the military's warning and continue their normal routines. Hank meets with Dr. Prentice and presents his research findings. He is shocked to learn that the government already knew ick would die when exposed to UV light. Dr. Prentice explains that they only have a limited number of UV bulbs because most of them have been sent to Wicklesburg. The parasitic continues to spread and infect more residents. Grace refuses to leave Eastbrook even though Dylan urges her to. After arguing with Dylan, Grace accepts a ride home from Hank. On the way, ick suddenly attacks and flips their car. Grace calls her cousin to rescue them with a tow truck. While waiting, Grace finds an envelope containing the paternity test results. Grace refuses to acknowledge Hank as her father. She is angry that for 18 years he was never part of her life. Ick attacks again, but Grace and Hank survive by burning it, and Grace secretly keeps the paternity test results. The town of Eastbrook is preparing for the high school prom. Hank meets Stacy to ask about the possibility that Grace is his daughter, but ick suddenly drags Stacy underground. Hank attaches several UV lights to his body and heads to the prom to save Grace and the others. On the way, he meets Ted Kim, who is waiting for Grace. The prom at Eastbrook High School has begun. Meanwhile, Ted Kim is in danger after becoming trapped inside his car. Hank tries to help him, but ick enters the vehicle and kills Ted Kim. The prom descends into chaos as it preys on many students and faculty members. Hank saves Grace from the infected Dylan. They walk through the school hallways, now filled with ick. Dylan suddenly attacks Hank in an attempt to get to Grace, but Hank manages to kill him. Grace's two friends, Heather and Griffin, are hiding in a classroom. They escape through the air vents, while Hank tells Grace that both of her parents have died. Heather and Griffin survive and join Hank and Grace. The four of them head to the stadium to turn on lights that emit UV radiation. Hank instructs Griffin to connect the cables and flip all the switches, while he goes outside to activate the circuit breaker. Grace suddenly hugs Hank and tells him to be careful. Hank moves through the ick that is beginning to fill the stadium, while Grace and the others connect the wires. They soon see that ick has grown into a giant tentacled monster. Blocked by the creature, Hank grabs a football and manages to activate the circuit breaker. Just when they think the danger is over, ick suddenly destroys the lights from underground. Hank and the remaining attendees climb the tower to save themselves, but they are killed, leaving only Grace, Heather, Griffin, and Hank alive. As ick begins climbing to the top of the tower, Grace cries while hugging Hank. Soon after, the sun rises, and the four of them finally survive. Sometime later, the residents of Eastbrook install many UV lights to prevent ick, and life returns to normal. Grace has accepted Hank as her father figure, but they are both shocked when they open the paternity test results that Grace had previously sent in, and the movie ends. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for the next movie recap.